Think before you say, we were often told in childhood. But in the Tuyuka language, spoken by the Indians living in the Amazon, they always think about what they are talking about. Indeed, in the Tuyuka language there are special verb endings that give the listener to understand how the speaker knows what he is talking about. And there is no way to do without them, the language demands. So when you say something like, a woman is washing clothes, you must add, I know, because I saw it myself. Other incredible complexities of this language include 50 to 140 classes of nouns. Tuyuka language is agglutinative, which means that one word can mean a whole phrase. And two whole words, meaning the pronoun we, inclusive and exclusive.
There are only 3 vowel sounds in the Abkhaz language, a, as and a. The rest of the vowels, denoted in writing by separate letters e, o, and y, are obtained from a combination of other vowels and consonants. The Abkhazian language compensates for the vocal poverty with an abundance of consonants. In the literary language there are 58, and in the Dzib dialect as many as 67. By the way, the Abkhaz alphabet based on the Cyrillic alphabet was created in 1862, and 3 years later the Abkhazian primer was released. The Abkhazian manner of beginning a word with the letter A has been joked many times.
But this prefix, or in common parlance the prefix, performs the same function in the Abkhaz language as the in English is a definite article. It is put before all nouns, and according to the rules of the Abkhaz language, it is added to borrowed words too. So the Ajabel Eskadri is not an anecdote. Some of the Khoisan languages are endangered, and many have already become extinct. But still, about 370,000 people speak these very unusual dialects. The fact is that in the languages spoken in southern Africa around the Kalahari Desert, there are so-called clicks or clicking consonants. The term Khoisan itself was constructed from the words of the Khoisan language Nama, Ko, in it means a person, and San means bushman. Initially, this term was used to denote the physical racial type of these peoples, and only much later the American linguist Joseph Greenberg applied the term to the Makra family of languages, using clicking sounds. Not so long ago, genetic scientists confirmed the ancient isolation of the Khoisan peoples from the rest of humanity and found that the tribes living north and south of the Kalahari have been isolated from each other for at least 30,000 years. Anyone who has tried to learn all 15 Finnish cases and more than 800 conjugations and personal forms of the verb will agree that the Finnish language is difficult. Finns don't just burn hearts with a verb, they inflect the verb like a noun. Add to this the alternation of consonants, an abundance of suffixes and mysterious postpositions, a difficult verb control for a foreigner, and it seems just right to fall into despair. But take your time, there is a lot of comfort in the Finnish language for the diligent student. Words are both heard and written and read in the same way, there are no unpronounceable letters here. The stress always falls on the first syllable, and the category of gender is absent altogether, which is quite capable of warming the soul of a supporter of equality. Finnish has several past tenses, but the future tense is completely absent. Connoisseurs of national character argue that this is because the Finns are accustomed to being responsible for the words spoken, and if the Finn has promised, then he will definitely do it. The newest Chinese dictionary, Zhongguo, compiled in 1994, contains "Are you sitting?" minus hieroglyphs. It would be more correct, however, to speak not about the Chinese language, but about the Chinese branch of languages, which unites many dialects, but there are still no easy ones among them. Take the hieroglyphs as a consolation. We can immediately say that not all of the 85,000 are actively used in the modern language. The lion's share of them is found only in the literary monuments of various Chinese dynasties and are no longer used in practice. Let's say the hieroglyph Ifast, meaning chatty, which consists of 64 lines. Nevertheless, the current hieroglyphs are not so simple. For example, the hieroglyph Nan, which means stuffy nose, is depicted with 36 dashes. Unlike happy Europeans who learn a few dozen letters, a resident of the Middle Kingdom, in order to begin to read in the slightest degree, must memorize, at worst, at least, hieroglyphs. But each hieroglyph also needs to be learned to draw. Oh, you're heavy, Chinese literacy. The champion of the verb forms is, of course, the Chippewa American Indian language, or, as they are more often called, the Ojibwe. Linguists call the Chippewa language the southwestern dialect of the Ojibwe language proper. So, in this language Chippewa, as many as 6,000 verb forms. But even with all the complexities of this language, you certainly know a couple of words from it. These are, for example, the words wigwam or totem. Based on the legends of the Ojibwe people, the epic poem by Henry Longfellow was written. The American classic used myths, place names and even words from the Ojibwe language, but like any outsider he was not able to take everything into account. So the mistake is right on the cover. The legendary Ojibwe hero is called Nanaboyo, because Hiawatha is a character from the Iroquois mythology. Do you know the word igloo, which means an Eskimo winter dwelling made of snow or ice blocks? Then congratulations, you know a word from the Eskimo language. It also rightfully takes its place of honor among the most difficult languages in the world. The Guinness Book of Records assures that it contains 63 forms of the present tense, and simple nouns in it have 252 inflections. The term inflection in linguistics denotes different types of changes in words or roots. Let's just correct the Guinness Book. Modern linguists do not single out the Eskimo language. Apparently, we are talking about the entire Eskimo branch of the Eskimo-Aleutian languages. But in the main registrar of world records is not mistaken, all Eskimo languages are extremely complex. For example, in one verb form, using suffixes, you can express up to 12 grammatical categories. Speakers of this language think figuratively. The word internet in it is expressed by the term ikiavivik, which means travel through the layers. The number of languages spoken by the indigenous peoples of Dagestan cannot be accurately counted. We can only say that 14 of them are written. The most difficult of them, and, according to the Guinness Book of Records, one of the most difficult in the world, is Tabasaran. The language of the Lisan branch of the Dagestan family of languages holds the world record for the number of cases. They are distinguished in the Tabasaran language from 44 to 52. It has 54 letters and 10 parts of speech, and there are no prepositions, and postpositions are used instead. So that life does not seem like honey to a student of the Tabasaran language, there are as many as 3 dialects in the language. But there are a lot of borrowings in the Tabasaran's dictionary. The mountain inhabitants borrowed from the Farsi language the ancient household, military and craft terminology. Religious and scientific terms were borrowed from the Arabic Tabasaran. And the Russian language shared with Tabasaran modern socio-political and scientific technical vocabulary. Just don't forget that all these words change in more than 50 cases. The idea of using complex languages to transmit encrypted messages came to the Americans back in the First World War. Then the US Army was served by the Choctaw Indians. During World War I, this experience was used. And in addition to the complex Basque language, they began to transmit messages in the Navajo language. Fortunately, there were enough speakers of this complex language who also knew English, but there were no written language in the language, and therefore, there were no dictionaries at all. Wind talkers, that is, talkers with the wind, as the Navajo cryptographers called themselves, had to even invent new words that were previously absent in their language. For example, the plane was called Noasya, that is, owl, the submarine, Beshlo, literally, ironfish. And the Navajo signalman called Hitler, Positivo, that is, the crazy white man. In addition to vowels and consonants, this language has 4 more tones: high, low, ascending and descending. Especially complex in the Navajo language are verb forms, which consist of a stem, to which word formative and inflectional prefixes are added. The fascist himself will break his head. In this unique, and like anything European language, very ancient concepts have been preserved. For example, the word knife in it literally means the stone that cuts, and ceiling means the roof of the cave. We are talking about the language that its speakers call Euskara, and we call it the Basque language. This is the so-called isolated language. It does not belong to any of the known language families. It is now spoken and written by about people, mostly living on the coastal strip 50 kilometers wide from the Spanish city of Bilbao to the city of Bayonne in France. The Basque language belongs to agglutinative languages. This is how linguists call languages, in which suffixes and prefixes are used to form new words, and each of them carries only one meaning. There are about 500,000 words in the dictionary of the Basque language, about the same as in our great and mighty one. This is explained by the large number of synonyms and dialect variants. The lack of awareness and complexity of the Basque language played a positive role. During the Second World War, it was used by the US Army ransomware radio operators.